Okay, this week on the podcast, I'm joined by my friend Katie Sherman. Katie is in insurance. She does residential and commercial insurance with the Lyons Agency in Southern Maine. Katie is one of those people that you can't help but smile when you're talking to. She's just a good person, funny person, and really enjoy talking to her. This is the Randy Forcier Podcast. It's available on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. If you could subscribe on one of those platforms, I would really appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube and you could like the video, comment, that'd be awesome too. So just trying to grow this thing. All of those little things help feed the algorithm, get more eyeballs on it. So that would be great. But I appreciate the support. Thanks again. Here's Katie. Excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Oh, so nervous.
Yeah, you look very nervous. You look very nervous. And knowing you, you must have been up all night worrying about the podcast today. So
yeah, I have my speech all written out.
I want to have you on. We do some networking together. You help me out with some commercial insurance. You work for Lyons Agency in this crazy world of insurance right now. And I wanted to have you on to talk about it, profile your business, that sort of stuff. So are you up for a conversation about that?
Yeah, please.
Before we get to the insurance stuff, tell me about your background, like where you're from, how you got to Lyons. Just fill me in a little bit.
Yeah, quickly. Born and raised in Augusta, Maine. So I went to Coney High School. I love telling people that I played basketball for Coach Paul Vachon. He's a staple in the state of Maine.
Okay, no kidding.
Yeah, so great program, great school district. I came to Southern Maine. Before I got into insurance, I was actually a district manager for GNC, the supplement retailer.
Mm-hmm. I remember you saying this. This is a good refresher. So
yeah, and that was great. I loved it. But retail, just, it's not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's very time consuming. So I went into insurance sales because I thought it was going to be less time consuming. And that was jokes on me. But no, it's different. I like it. So I started with Liberty Mutual and I was there for 5 years. And then life just happened and changed. I had a daughter and I needed to step away from insurance sales to be a better mom. And then I worked as an operations manager for a landscaping and plowing company.
Yeah.
And then I was the office manager for Seamus Paving and Seal Coating. So little shout out to those guys if you ever need.
I think you were working for them the first time I met you.
Yeah, the great company, great owner. I loved working for them. It was during COVID that I actually found my way to the Lyons Agency. Mm-hmm. And it was just COVID turned everybody's lives upside down. My daughter was home with me all the time, and she's hard of hearing, so we had to do like Zoom classes, Zoom this, Zoom that. And by the time I got to the Lyons Agency, it was like 8:30 to 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
Love this for me. So
was one of the appeals of the Lyons Agency like a work from home type scenario?
Yep. It was work from home, but also Olive, my daughter, was home with me for every single interview that I had.
Yeah.
And so when they offered me the job, I said, are we sure? Like, you know, my daughter's home with me. Like, I just want to make sure I'm not leaving a good company for a good company and then it doesn't work out. Yeah. And the owner, I'll never forget it. He said, nobody works harder than a mom. Yeah. We'd love to have you. And I was like, oh, this will work out great. So I plan on being here for a very long time.
So how long ago was that?
Since 2020.
Okay.
August of 2020.
All right. I just wanted to take 1 second from the podcast to let you know that besides hosting, I also do mortgages. I'm a residential loan officer with Norcom Mortgage in Saco, Maine. If you or anyone you know is thinking about buying a home in 2024 or refinancing as rates are coming down, please feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to help. My contact information is in the description below. Thanks, and back to the pod. So
I know.
Insurance business has probably changed a decent amount since then.
Yeah,
things seem like they've gotten weird.
Super weird. And I think it all kind of started with COVID. During COVID, a lot of insurance companies handed out rebates. They gave people money back on their auto insurance because they weren't driving as much. They were just trying to contribute to the economy by just cutting rates. And it seemed like overnight, the cost of labor, the cost of building material, everything just flipped. Mm-hmm. And then the next night, the prices on used vehicles flipped. You couldn't get new vehicles. You couldn't get parts. And then ever since COVID, a lot of the collision repair shops have been booked out for 6 months or more.
Yeah.
And that impacts claims drastically. And that's ultimately where premiums are derived, is from claims.
Totally. The collision center thing kind of blows my mind just because my mom had a little bit of an incident. She had to have some work done on her vehicle, and thankfully her car was still drivable, so she's able to wait. But like, we're talking months and months away, like you said. It just blew my mind. I'm like, huh? You have to wait till like May, and this happened, a month or two ago. I was like, doesn't even make any sense. But
Yeah.
what do you do if your car's not drivable? Then what? Because most insurance doesn't cover 6 months
No.
worth of a rental car, or just there's a whole bunch of things that.
Yeah, in typical policies will only cover 30 days maximum.
Yeah.
And then after 30 days, you are carpooling, sharing, asking everybody you know for favors, and then just hoping you can get in.
I wonder how much staffing has to do with it at those places. I don't know. What are the reasons that collision centers are busy? Just a lot of accidents, or lack of staff, or lack of collision centers to begin with anymore? I don't know. Do you ever hear anything on your side of things?
A lot of the times it's parts. It's parts. Yeah, a lot of the times it's parts because there was a parts shortage. Mm-hmm. So if you did have to have something major done, cosmetic, oftentimes that wasn't the issue. It was more mechanical, because then you'd have to wait for the part to come from the original manufacturer to replace it. So, and then if you only have, this many people who are able to work, you have to just kind of shift it around. So I think a lot of it came from parts. Definitely the labor shortage, mm-hmm. and not just the labor shortage, a skilled labor shortage.
People talk about, we should get our kids into the trades. We need more plumbers and electricians and carpenters and all this stuff. And like, part of me thinks like we need more people doing this type of skilled labor as well to work on these vehicles anymore, because it's not a field that people are probably just knocking the doors down to get into. And it makes these situations worse that we're talking about now.
Yeah, I hope at some point somebody comes up with some sort of incentive program for like the vocational schools. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or partner with community colleges to just, how it's like, oh, when I bought my house, if you buy your house in Buxton, Maine, you can qualify for this mortgage where you have 0% down, like maybe some sort of grant. Like if you get trained and certified for a 0% down loan, we'll get you started, something, because we need it for sure.
Definitely. So that has made things more difficult. Yeah, the cost of everything is just insane through COVID. So there's no doubt that that's played a role. So how about natural disasters? That been a...
Yeah. The recent flooding event was the worst flood Maine has seen. I mean, I can't say ever.
Well, yeah.
But that some of the houses that were total losses were built over 100 years ago, and they never sustained anything like this.
And we had, wasn't it like worst event ever, and then the second worst event all within 3 days of each other?
Yeah, total roads were washed out in Kennebunkport. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't even drive down them, just washed completely away.
And then even, wasn't it like last week or the week before, and we're recording this in the middle or second half of March, but didn't like 10 days ago, wasn't there like another really high tide in Kennebunkport, just like on a random day? Wasn't a storm, wasn't anything crazy, just like a high tide, and the whole freaking beach is washed out again. And you're just like, what the hell is going to happen like every 2 months now? Doesn't make any sense.
It's the flood warning. And I know, for me personally, I bought my house 11 years ago, and my house has a sump pump in it, and it never ran. It would run maybe once in the spring when all the snow would melt, and the ground wasn't quite absorbing it yet. But now, every single time it rains, my sump pump is just running constantly. So I think for even homes that aren't near the ocean or near any sort of body of water, I think we're seeing that water table rise. So now is a really important time for people to check their home insurance coverages with their agent, for sure.
Absolutely. So why don't we talk about the flood insurance stuff for a sec? Because I think there's misconception about what flood insurance is and what it covers. In my business, like the mortgage side of things, people only get flood insurance if they're told they have to get flood insurance to get a mortgage. Most people don't get it on their own, right? Or have you experienced people that get it independent of being told to by their mortgage company?
Very rarely do people choose to get it on their own. 9 times out of 10, it's only a mortgage requirement. And most policies will only cover up to $250,000 in dwelling. And that satisfies...
Blows my mind.
Mortgage.
Blows my mind.
Yeah. So it's definitely changing. I think with these last few events, because last December around Christmas time, we had a flooding event. And then this year we had the flooding event. I think we're going to see flood zones changing.
Totally.
And more people, more mortgages are going to be making it a requirement. But also, we've had more people inquire about flood insurance. Like, do I have to be in a flood zone to get it? No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. You can get it regardless of where you live. It's optional.
It's so strange because you would think if you're not in a flood zone, the chances of your home flooding are pretty low. It's got to have something to do with elevation and, water that's close by and stuff. But like, I'm sure that whatever happened in January, there was homes that weren't in flood zones that got flooded, right? I would assume that's the case.
Yeah. We had a lot of people who've called in and wanted to make a claim on their house, and they didn't have the coverage for it, and they weren't in a flood zone. They had a mortgage company. The mortgage company didn't require it. So it was just one of those things really important as an agent to make sure we're at least letting our customers know that they can choose to buy it.
Yeah, so you probably do a better job of that now, but it's almost like a scenario that it's like no one's fault. It's not the mortgage companies for not requiring it. It's not the insurance company. It's not the homeowners or whatever. It's just a complete freak thing that catches a whole bunch of people off guard, and it's really unfortunate. You think about people that have $250,000 of coverage. I think of these places that live in like Kennebunk Beach or Biddeford Pool or any of these coastal places that got beaten up pretty bad. Like 250 is going to do nothing for those people. I can see it helping. Like, okay, some water comes in and it ruins the basement, and you have $250,000 of coverage, and that will take care of that. But we're talking houses that freaking fall into the ocean.
Yeah,
it's like what happens in those situations? Not that it happens often, but you might not even be able to speak to it. But like in general, they don't have the coverage they need, and then what? They're SOL.
I think it's a combination of that, and also there might be federal programs available where you can submit. I think there's definitely certain requirements, though. Like I think it has to be your primary home.
Yeah, which isn't always the case for a lot of those places.
No.
A lot of like short-term rentals, maybe just second homes, but it's probably a fairly low percentage of them that are primary residences.
Yeah. I mean, some of them weren't even built to be primary residences. They were only built to be seasonal homes. So, so it's a really unfortunate event, and I feel awful anytime we have a big storm like that, just because we are Maine, we are the oldest population.
Yeah.
A lot of our buildings were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and a lot of the properties are family properties. And so when those get damaged, it's like a grandchild who inherits something, and it's an added expense.
Yeah.
They're not making money off of it necessarily. So we see that a lot too. And that's where you really feel for them. Like, your grandparents' home was ruined and now there's nothing.
Yeah. We have some friends with that. Their home's not ruined, but it was condemned by the city, and there's a lot of work to be done to bring it back up to where it needs to be. And it is kind of heartbreaking because not like they're just trying to hold on to it, but it's not like there's some like rich people from Massachusetts or New York that, whatever, it's going to take a couple million to rebuild it. No big deal. It's like, they're not just, there's not unlimited funds to take care of it. So it is a sad situation in those cases. So has that taken a toll on you personally? Right? Like, I feel like there's a few times I saw you and you're like, this is like the worst day or the worst week or whatever.
Because it's never a good day when you're on the phone with a client and they have to submit a claim, because we either hear from people the best days of their lives, we're buying a house, we're so happy, or we have to put in a claim because we've experienced something horrible.
Yeah.
And it's hard. So there were just days where we were just filing claim after claim after claim, and then trying to communicate with adjusters and then property managers and then the homeowners, and some flood insurance companies, because you can buy it on like an open market. So those flood insurance companies have changed their requirements to where they will only hold your policy if you've never had a claim. Yep. So now we're experiencing some of these people who are paying $600 a year for flood insurance. They had a $65,000 claim, and now we have to rewrite it, and the renewal is going to be $8,000. Right. And you're in mortgages, so sometimes the mortgage company is paying it through escrow. And now imagine getting your escrows out of whack. You can either increase your mortgage payment by $875 a month, or you can write us a check for a lump sum of $8,000. It's just tough.
And in this world where everything seems to be going up, we talk about all the time, and gas and food and taxes and everything. It's like you just add that kind of change, and it's just a gut punch, So, I mean, I guess it's the reality of the situation, but it's one of the things that probably makes your business kind of challenging at this point. But at the same time, maybe you could speak to the benefits of having a local agent versus not having a local agent, where you're just dealing with a 1-800 number or a website or something like that. I mean, I think it's probably more important than ever to work with someone like yourself, boots on the ground, that can pick up the phone when you call.
Yeah, absolutely. I never recommend anyone buying their own insurance online because I have to go through testing and training to know what to put on a policy and what not to put on a policy. But not only that, but I hear from clients firsthand what they wish they had for coverages, what they need for coverages, and then I can put together the recommendations. But really my stand as a local agent is I try to educate my clients in the control what you can. So the things that we can control are going to be just our overall home maintenance, being proactive when it comes to needing to do repairs and changing things out for wear and tear. But then also I tell everyone, if your son or daughter is getting their license soon, call me for a hypothetical quote with what vehicle you're looking at purchasing. So that way, if you randomly decide on a Saturday to buy them a car, you're not totally shocked when it's a $2,000 increase.
We're both screwed. Oh man, it's crazy.
Yeah. And it does matter what kind of car. It absolutely does matter what your youthful operator is driving. So I tell everyone before they make any changes to their business, before they make any major changes to their home, before they buy any new vehicle or make any changes to the drivers, to just call ahead of time. And we can just manipulate your policy, quote it out, and that way you can prepare for it 6 months in advance. So
but it's so much better to have a Katie that you can call to have those conversations than like just, it's funny, in my business, there's an amount of goodwill towards USAA. Like you must see it in your business. Like I don't want to do this, like, make it be like a USAA bashing podcast, but like that freaking company, man. And every time you call, it's someone different and they're faxing stuff and it's just a pain in the ass to work with. And it's like, you have to choose between that, and people love USA. They think it's like an extension of the government or whatever. It's weird. It's weird. Or they could have you like that knows them and their situation, can pull up their stuff in like 2 freaking seconds. It's like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. Honestly, my favorite thing with USAA, and then we can get off the subject, but is they will sell renters insurance policies with $500,000 of contents coverage.
Oh, perfect.
And $100,000 in liability. And people will be like, well, can you quote the $500,000 in contents? And I'm like, do you have
like $10,000 worth? I mean,
it's like that's how they make it look like they're saving you a ton of money by giving you ample coverage and something you're never going to use, but then giving you only $100,000 in liability, which as a renter, you're more likely to use your liability coverage than you are your contents coverage.
Yeah. So it's a no-brainer to give you a call. What are the insurances that you focus on? Right? You give me the rundown.
Yeah, I do property and casualty. So I primarily focus on commercial insurance, but I can also do, the auto and homes as well. So I try to do the commercial insurance and then build it as a package. So yeah.
Yeah. So that includes, besides just the property stuff, but you also do umbrella policies, which is probably something you recommend.
Yeah, I recommend. You can never have enough liability coverage in today's world. So an umbrella policy for any business owner, highly recommend. Any property owner, highly recommend. Any parent with a child driving or anybody who does any volunteer work, I highly recommend an umbrella policy.
So everything you just said is like everybody, basically.
Everybody.
So it's almost like everyone could have a use case for umbrella insurance, but what percentage of people have umbrella insurance? Freaking 10%?
It's so so low. It's such a low amount. Yeah.
I mean, it's not that expensive.
No, for what you get, it really isn't. But it's one of those things. Insurance is one of those things you hate to pay for that you hope to never
need it.
Yeah. So it's, nobody wants to be like, oh, let me add more insurance. But, it's one of those things.
I'm going to up my insurance this year. I think that would be the smart thing to do. But yeah, no one does do that.
No, never. No, never.
But it is nice to get out here and like promote that stuff. And in my business, like I work very like hand in hand with people in your profession. Like when people buy a home, it's an easy referral for me to say, hey, you need to get insurance. And it's nice to have people that are having the conversations about the tough things with people. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but replacement cost is an issue with the cost of everything going up. And, there are minimums people need to get a mortgage, but there are reasons to go higher than that. And that's something that through that consultative approach, you guys can discuss.
Yeah. We do. I feel like I do at least like a dozen replacement cost evaluations a day. They're super easy to do. It's just one way to make sure that you're properly covered on anything that you own, really. So
is that the biggest opportunity for people right now, like where it could be a problem for them, is that they haven't revisited their replacement coverages?
Yeah. So like 4 years ago when COVID happened, most insurance policies had like a 4% automatic increase on their dwelling coverage to guard against inflation. And then we had those overnight incidences where prices of everything just changed. And it took about 2 years for companies to add 8% auto increase on the dwelling. So there was just that 2-year gap where things for some people changed drastically. So anytime we renew a policy, we try to do the replacement cost evaluation just to make sure that they're properly covered.
Yeah. I mean, if I think of if something happened to my home and I didn't, if I had not reviewed my replacement coverage, like I'd probably be in pretty bad shape. And there's probably many people out there that are in that situation. So is that one of the big pieces of advice that you'd give to people when it comes to insurance nowadays? Yeah,
is to just have a relationship with your agent. If not me, then with whatever agent you currently have, because besides you, who's in the mortgage industry, no one really knows what a replacement cost evaluation is.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean anything to anyone other than us. Yeah. And so with the information that we have, it's like our job to make sure that they get it and that we're recommending what is best for them and properly educating them. So that's another huge reason to have an agent.
Do people ever contact you for life insurance or anything like that? Is that something the agency maybe does? Or I don't know if it's like something you hand off to a partner or someone else in the office.
Yeah, we do life insurance as well. Actually, I have a life insurance meeting, I think tomorrow, with somebody I do commercial insurance for. And he was like, hey, by the way, do you do this? And I was like, oh, yeah, so sorry I didn't offer that before. Let's do it.
More fun stuff to talk about, right? Like it's just kind of like doom and gloom and worst case scenarios. But again, like we already said, it's just one of those things that you don't need it till you need it. And it's good to have when you do need it. So
and life insurance is also one of those things where it's not required by anybody. So a lot of people forego it because they don't either see the need in it or they can't budget it. And I will say, as somebody who had a parent pass away when I was 15 and they did not have a substantial life insurance policy, it is absolutely life-changing.
Yeah.
The difference it could make to have a substantial life policy versus, a small life insurance policy.
Yeah, and how that leaves the people, the condition that it leaves the people behind you. Those are obviously pretty tough situations, but also important. So about the Lyons Agency, can you give me a quick rundown of the Lyons Agency? I mean, based out of Wells, right?
Yeah. So the Lyons Agency is a part of the 70 Lyons group. And so 70 is Coastal Insurance, Ham Insurance, the Lyons Agency, and then our location in Wells. So we're a very small group. We're very family oriented. It's probably the best working environment I've ever experienced in my life. Anyone who comes in to work with us, it's just you feel at home. You feel comfortable, you feel at ease. It's a great organization. It's owned by two brothers, John and Luke, 70. And they're amazing to work for.
Which kind of brings me back to one of the things that we talked about earlier, your daughter.
Yeah.
And how old is she again?
She's 9.
She's 9. And you mentioned earlier that she's hard of hearing. And we talked a little bit about this before. How has that been, being like mom of a daughter that's deaf? There seems like there's so many things you've had to learn, and it's cool to see like how you parent and talk about sign language type stuff, and the way you look at situations maybe different than other people do.
Yeah, honestly, my daughter is so tired of hearing me say it, but I personally don't like noise. I don't like sound. There's a lot of noises that bother me. So I tell her all the time, the greatest gift I ever gave you was being deaf. Because the culture is beautiful. The community is beautiful. I've never been a part of anything like the deaf community. They're so welcoming. And as a new mom, my first and only child, I was told she was deaf or could potentially be deaf within 12 hours of birth with the
Really?
newborn, yeah, with the infant newborn hearing screening. And I didn't know what to do. I don't have anybody in my life who's deaf. Nobody in Olive's family is
Yeah.
deaf or hard of hearing. So we were just like, well, what do we do next? And I just started couldn't sleep, so I just started emailing and messaging everything I found out online, and I was just put in contact with a lot of great people who were deaf or hard of hearing and just recommended sign language, the deaf school, and just putting her around people like her to
Yeah.
show her that, she really is no different.
I hate to even bring this part up, but like it wasn't until really like the Lewiston situation. I don't think I realized like how special the community was until that. Like a lot of those people got profiled, and at least one of the people that was a victim in that shooting.
Yeah. Yeah. They say Maine is what? All of us are 3 degrees of separation apart.
Mm-hmm.
The deaf community, there's no separation. They're
Yeah.
all just
Everyone
so
knows
close.
everyone.
Everybody knows everyone. And I had one friend who was shot and recovered physically. And then another friend was killed, and his name was Josh Seal. And Josh and his wife Liz, they are staples in the deaf community. And I think about them often. I hold them to such high regard because when I was navigating everything and learning how to be a parent of a deaf child, I put a lot of like obstacles in my head, Olive can't do this, she can't do this, she can't do this, she can't do this, she's going to have a hard time with this is going to be a problem. And like I had all this weight in my head and these obstacles in my head. And I remember meeting Josh and Liz, and they only had 2 kids at the time. And they were so kind to me, and they were so patient, and they got me involved in Hands and Voices. They got me involved with Hear Me Now. They put me on the email chain so I could attend all of the events and bring Olive so she could be around other deaf and hard of hearing kids. And after I met them and their family, I left completely weightless. All the weight had been lifted because the only thing Olive can't do is hear perfectly. And being around them showed me that all of those obstacles I put on her were just like made up obstacles in my head. So for this to happen to them, and for 4 deaf men to be killed in the shooting, and for it to happen to that community is just, it breaks my heart in like a whole new level. Yeah. And personally, just speaking for how we experienced it, one of our friends who was shot, that was Olive's friend's dad. And then Josh, who was killed, that's Olive's friend's dad. So to have that conversation with Olive, at 9 about how real this is for her and how close it hit us. And it was just really tragic. It was just tragic and totally unnecessary. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy the deaf community is so tight knit. I'm happy that they'll all get through it together for sure. And Josh did some really amazing things. Yeah, really amazing. One of the things that he put together was the Dirigo experience. And it's a camp through Pine Tree Camp. And it's a camp where deaf and hard of hearing kids in Maine get to go to a sleepaway camp. And they're surrounded by other deaf and hard of hearing kids. There are deaf and hard of hearing counselors. They're surrounded by American Sign Language, cued speech, and spoken language. And it's just, that was his passion. And he made it come to fruition, and it's going to continue on because of who he was and the legacy he left behind. So I'm really happy about that program.
I'm glad we got a chance to mention that. That is quite a legacy. I'm sure that's something that'll continue on stronger than ever. The testimonials for him in particular poured in afterwards of all the people that were victims of that shooting. He was that one person that always seemed to be like, many people knew him. I remember when it happened, I think you did a Facebook post, and like, you were the person that I think of in my life that was closest to anyone involved in that shooting. But it was, man, that is a very sad thing. And I'm glad that he had such an impact on your life. It's great to be able to have someone like that takes all that weight off your shoulders, like you said. Because I think not even just having like a deaf kid, but like a lot of ways in people's lives, they probably create obstacles and reasons in their head why they can't do anything. And a lot of it is just artificial and self-talk. So to have someone take that off your shoulders is pretty cool. And it's nice to hear the impact that he had on you. And all, of course.
Yeah, definitely. And me and probably every other family that has a deaf and hard of hearing kid, Olive's age or younger, he and Liz had a hand in introducing them to the community one way or the other.
Are there any charities that have arisen since his passing, or is there a deaf charity in Maine that's the biggest one that people should be aware of?
Yeah, there's a couple. So there's Maine Hands and Voices, which this one's kind of like a hard one to explain, but I was a member and a board member for a brief time, but really they connect language guides with new families who are coming into the deaf and hard of hearing community. So they kind of hold your hand. You get assigned someone, you get to text them, you can call them, you can email them, and they hold your hand through everything. And then they put on a lot of the really awesome events through the entire state of Maine that bring all of those deaf kiddos together. And then the other one is the Dirigo Experience. So you can actually go to pinetreecamp.org, I believe is the website. And on their page, you'll be able to find the Dirigo Experience, and you can still make donations in Josh's honor on that page too.
I'll be sure to share that. So thanks for taking the time to talk about that stuff. I know it's super personal and just some of those are tough experiences to relive. So I appreciate you taking that. I definitely want to give you an opportunity to share and get them some recognition.
Yeah.
So I guess wrapping up, before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to share the best way for people to get in touch with you. Again, when it comes to insurance, or if someone listens to this podcast and is like, I have someone in my life that has a deaf child or something along those lines, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways. You can find me on Facebook, Katie Sherman, and a friend of ours, Jake, is putting together a webpage for me. But for now, for business, you can find me through the Lyons Agency insurance.com, and that will have all my work contact information.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's always fun to talk to you. We'll have some stories to tell about this podcast another time. We'll do it again, maybe for a third time.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.
All right. Bye.